Hey, welcome to the Heritage Minute Podcast. I'm your host, Lieutenant Colonel retired Steve Simon, class of 1977. This year marks 50 years of women contributing to the mission and legacy of United States Air Force Academy. Over those 5 decades, female graduates have served, led, and shaped the Academy and the Air Force in meaningful and lasting ways. For this episode, I'm excited to share the mic with Lieutenant Colonel retired Tanya Hurwitz, class of 1995. Tanya represents a generation of graduates who have carried that legacy forward, and she continues to contribute today. We'll talk about her USAFA, active duty, and civilian careers, and the exciting things she's working on these days. Tanya, welcome. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk with you.
Where are you from, and what motivated you to attend the Academy?
My dad was in the Air Force for 30 years, and he did not retire until I was a lieutenant. So I spent my whole childhood around the military, moving around the world. I have a distinct memory of being at my dad's office at Mather Air Force Base, and I was 5, and I remember thinking, I want to attend USAFA. So I don't necessarily know what motivated me when I was 5, but I have a distinct memory of that. Looking back, doing the math, that was probably 1978 or 1979. So maybe it was something about the first class with women, but I was 5. And then I guess the important thing is that I did not change my mind. And then over the course of growing up, we spent a lot of time in Germany and Italy and in Korea. And I just had a series of experiences that reinforced my probably idealistic views of the military and like why I wanted to attend USAFA. I have memories of living in Neubrücke, Germany for 3 years while I was in elementary school. And our school was in an old hospital that was in some kind of turnkey status to turn back into a hospital if the Russians were to cross the Fulda Gap and invade into Europe. But there was this one hallway that we would often pass. Hidden deep in the shadows in the back, there were hospital beds. And in my mind, it was a little hazy. And I thought maybe that the ghosts of the people who were in the hospital in the years past were going to come attack me. But it just was a spooky feeling of, even as a young kid, like understanding why we have the military to protect and defend democracy. We spent 2 years in Seoul, Korea. And we were there from like 87 to 89, which is when Korea transitioned from an authoritarian regime to democracy. So we were there for the first democratic elections and the protests and the turmoils the country transitioned to democracy. And it made me really appreciate the United States and what we had. And like a series of experiences like that just kept on reinforcing why I wanted to go to USAFA.
But my dad was military as well, so I definitely understand the living it and knowing the culture, not necessarily knowing what it's going to be like when you're inside, but definitely being exposed to it. I think that does help us kind of know what we want. So when you look back at the 50 years of women at the Academy, what stands out to you about how that experience has evolved over time?
Being involved in planning for the 50-year celebration has really given me more perspective on how things have changed and how things have stayed the same. What stands out most to me is how people look back on their time at the Academy. From the early years and the perspective of being such a small percentage of the cadet wing population and the thoughts on how women were being integrated, first being in a standalone floor, on a standalone section of the Academy, and how that's not really integrating into the cadet wing and how they wanted to be closer to their classmates and their squadrons, to conversations about bathrooms and how bathrooms were converted. The overall experience of the Academy changes over time, and we come away shaped in a certain way, having these same experiences, but you can't make assumptions about what any one person's experience was at the Academy. What we take as tradition maybe changed 2 years ago.
How did your Academy time shape the way you approached your career after graduation?
When I was at the Academy, I started taking the attitude of just say yes to things and doing things that make you uncomfortable. One of the nights in Arnold Hall, there was a period where all of the coaches, or many of the coaches, got up on stage and told us about their teams, specifically the ones that would take walk-ons, and they talked about the process and who they were looking for to walk on. And I remember the fencing coach getting up there and talking about how they would take walk-ons, and if you just came to practice and tryouts, that they would teach you if you mutually agreed that you had an aptitude. And I took a note, put it in the back of my mind, but I was going to try out for soccer because I'd played soccer in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to one day of soccer practice or tryouts, and I realized that I was not in that league. So I said, let's give fencing a go. And just that decision shaped so many things about my life moving forward. I look back and I had unconsciously chosen to start saying yes to experiences. And I took that forward with me in my career and what I wanted to do moving forward. So, for example, there was one time where I was offered a job and I was only told, you're going to move to DC, you don't know where you're going to work, and you don't know what you're going to be working on. Would you like to take the job? And I was like, yes, I do want that job. That sounds cool.
Just to find out what it is.
Yes, and it was. So I think just that overall life experience of trying to remember to do things that you're uncomfortable doing, that it's okay.
So what was your primary career field?
Space operations. And then I had a secondary as an engineer.
And then after retirement?
For the rest of my career, I went back and forth between operations and engineering, and it really paved the way for me to have a broad, interesting to me career in space. Mm-hmm. And I loved it so much that I stuck around for 28 years, even as a lieutenant colonel, stuck around long enough to be able to transition to the Space Force and retire from the Space Force. Excellent. And then now be a civilian in the Space Force. Mm-hmm.
We're marking 50 years of female graduates contributing to the Academy and the Air Force, including, obviously, you. What does that milestone, the 50 years, mean to you?
It goes back and forth in my mind what it means, but it takes me back to a random dinner when I was a freshman. I had never gone to anything other than a mandatory dinner. Otherwise, I had gone and gotten food and taken it back to my room after fencing practice to go get right to studying. One night, I went by myself as a freshman to dinner in my blues. I got my food, sat down at a table, and it was all upper class cadets, all men. And I sat through the dinner at attention, listening to them talk about how women did not belong at the service academy. I was in the 16th class with women. So the whole time I was thinking, this happened when you were a kid. Mm-hmm. Let's get over it. So to me, 50 years and seeing the change from classes of about 10% women up to 25 and 30% women means that we really have changed the service and changed the academy in such a way that we're making sure that we actually go out and get the best people, the best people who are the most qualified to attend USAFA, because we're looking at the rest of the population that we hadn't been looking at before, and we've normalized it. So what in my mind, like when I was 5 and I decided to go to the academy, I just assumed it would be an option for me.
Of course.
I didn't realize it had just become an option.
Right.
So it's kind of normalized to me that it's been an option all along. I
was a firstie when the first class of women entered, and for the most part, things have improved, and we're being positive about it. So, and of course, you've been a very big part in bringing this milestone together with the 50th anniversary celebration now.
The 50-year celebration is happening the 23rd through the 26th of April of 2026, and we're gathering over 600 people who've signed up to attend in Colorado Springs, and we have an excellent program led by our celebration lead, Marianne Lawson Romerdahl, class of 2004, and Colonel Deanna Franks, class of 99. And they've put together this fantastic packed program with everything from heritage discussions to leadership, first in flight. We have our heritage committee who's going to be there, and they've taken on the awesome task of collecting over 100 oral histories for the Veterans History Project through the Library of Congress to preserve our stories. And I couldn't be more proud of the work that they've been doing. And we have authors to include Kathleen Utley Cornaherns, class of 1980, and her book, Bring Me Men, Brought Women, and another group of people who about 3 years ago decided to write a book called Necessary Turbulence, 50 Years, One Unbreakable Sisterhood, Forged in the Crucible of the Academy. And that book will be coming out soon. So we'll be hearing from our authors. We'll have a memorial service. We'll have service projects. And we'll have physical activity, hike and such. So just like the full range of experiences. And it's going to be packed. But I think what it's really going to bring is that it's a touch point and a sense of connection up and down the long blue line.
Impressive, the range of activities and the experience of the guests, and honored to have been asked to actually be one of the speakers. So I'll be there, and I'm really looking forward to that. What do you hope people take away from that event?
The biggest thing that I hope they take away is a sense of connection and community. And again, that connection to the long blue line, and to realize that 50 years with women, there's a lot of women in that 50 years. I've done the math, and it's almost 8,000 women. And I hope that it really reinforces our connection to the Academy and to each other. In October of last year, in 2025, Ebony Johnson, class of 2000, held a celebration of 50 years since President Ford signed the legislation directing West Point Navy and Air Force to admit women. And there were over 200 women in this event in D.C. and from all of the service academies. And a woman from the class of 1980 from West Point did the national anthem at the beginning of the event. And to hear 200 plus women who all have this mutual connection raised the hair on my arms. And I hope that everyone else gets that feeling.
So another acknowledgement of the significance of the 50th anniversary, of course, was the New York Stock Exchange recently. They invited Service Academy women to ring the opening bell, which obviously is a great honor. And now Carolyn Benishek, a colonel retired, class of 1987, was one of the Air Force Academy representatives. And I understand she's involved in this committee as well, or the event coming on.
Yes, she is. She's involved in the committee and the event. I would like a moment to go back a little bit to the beginning of how we started planning for this celebration.
Yes, please do.
In late 2022, Kate Smith, class of 82, and Gretchen Cook, class of 87, reached out to the Association of Graduates, opening the discussion for planning the 50-year celebration. And then shortly thereafter, I saw a notice on Facebook for a Zoom session to start planning. I happened to mention that I was retiring from active duty and going on terminal leave. And Gretchen and Kate heard me say I was retiring and said, hey, why don't you take over the lead for planning this event? So like good upperclassmen separated by a decade, they encouraged me to take on a leadership opportunity, which I took. And as part of that, I got to meet Carolyn Benishek, as a classmate of Gretchen, who joined in our planning team, and she's on our executive committee and is our treasurer. And then, of course, she's been involved in USAFA in so many different ways. It's been an honor to meet her and work with her, and to continue receiving mentorship from Carolyn and her experiences, and Gretchen and Kate and everyone that came before me, as well as getting leadership and mentorship from the people who came after me. I've met some of the lieutenants and young cadets, and they have reverse mentored me, if you will, because mentorship can go any direction. And I'm just a better person for having met Carolyn and everyone else in the long blue line.
Well, I guess those are the type of relationships that I think maybe might be fostered or magnified by this event that's coming up here later on this month. And it's going to be a phenomenal event. I'm really excited about attending. So we're visiting with Lieutenant Colonel Tanya Hurwitz, class of 95. We're just about out of time. In a moment, I want to ask for your final thoughts, Tanya. But first, a word of thanks to our listeners. A reminder that Heritage Minutes and the Heritage Minute podcast are presentations of the Long Blue Line Podcast Network. New Heritage Minute products published every Sunday on our social media channels and in audio and video. You can also find us on YouTube by searching Heritage Minutes, and you can watch or listen anytime at usafa.org/heritagehub. That's usafa.org/heritagehub. And don't forget, you can catch the This Day in Air Force Academy History feature every day on KAFA, the Academy's radio station 97.7 in Colorado Springs, or online at usafa.edu/radio. Again, we're visiting with Colonel Tanya Hurwitz, class of 1995. So, Tanya, do you have any final words for our audience?
First of all, I want to say that I have immense gratitude for everyone who's supported this journey. That includes family and friends and coworkers and the early classes that supported the integration of women and the current classes who are continuing on the traditions and taking on the mantle of leadership. I would also like to take a moment to thank the Association and Foundation for the wonderful support they've given us through the past 2.5 to 3 years of planning. We really couldn't have done it without you. So thank you.
Well, that will do it for this edition of the Heritage Minute podcast. Thank you for listening.
This edition of the Heritage Minute podcast was recorded on Saturday, April 11th, 2026.